Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Dylan from Prince of Wales Island up in southeast Alaska today. How's it going, Dylan?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm excited to talk to you on the phone. I was trying to see if I could get a hold of anyone that actually lives on the island and has had some Bigfoot encounters. And through some posts that I made in some groups, we were able to get connected. And just a little background on yourself. You do work in the timber industry up there in Prince of Wales, but you said that you do have some interesting sightings to share with the podcast listeners. I'm going to let you take the floor. And I know you've had a few times where you've seen Sasquatch over the years, but I'll have you start wherever you feel is a good starting point.
Okay. Now, I guess I could start with the first time I seen one. I lived on the island now for about 4 years. And the first time I come up, I have a friend who lives in Kenai, which is there's a peninsula sticking out towards Ketchikan, and there's a little town on that peninsula. You can drive to it, and it's an old native village. But we went crab fishing in that bay there. It's a pretty good place to go fishing. And we were throwing pots over, and I looked over to go mark the buoy, and I seen a shape moving between these two islands. And we didn't think anything about it, kept putting around, putting pots in. And we got closer and closer to this thing. I thought it was a log. There's lots of logs floating around after storms, deadheads, and if you hit it with your boat, you'll get a hole or mess up your prop. So I told him, and he took a look at it and he said, that ain't no log. That is they call them Kushtaka. It's the native Alaskan people here. They believe in these creatures that live near water, and they make these siren sounds like babies crying and women crying at night to draw men towards the water, and they pull them in and eat them. That's the story. And he wanted to get really close to it and kill it. We got in a fight. I didn't want him to mess with this thing. It was going to bring us in the water and kill us. But we got fairly close and looked at it through a scope on a rifle, and it was swimming pretty fast over towards this island that has a bunch of berry bushes, no trees. And I didn't think nothing of it. I thought it was a weird looking bear. But he swore up and down that that was indeed a Kushtaka or a Sasquatch. I'm pretty sure that they're about the same thing. And I didn't see nothing for a long time after that, for about 3 years. And then last year, I went to the Carter River Wilderness, and I was going to go to the lake, take a week off of work, and have a big fishing trip. Start at the lake and make my way down the river, and then go beach seining, and then get picked up. So I was at the cabin at the lake for 2-3 days and headed off down towards the mouth of the river where there's another cabin. And this area is very overgrown. It ain't been logged, I think, ever. So there's 9-10 foot Sitka spruce, very dense canopy, very dark. And that year we got 15 feet of rain. So it was raining nonstop the whole time. It's very dark. And when it's raining, you don't have a very good sense of anything, hearing or vision, smell. You can't really, I don't know how to describe it. You're almost numb walking through that stuff. And a bunch of salmonberry bushes, extremely dense. So I walked around a corner on the river, and I was going to go throw in, see if I could get a couple sockeye. They were running. It's about June. And I peered over, and I thought it was a bear because it's black, and it was looking down, so it looked like a snout of some kind. But I got closer to it, and it looked up. It heard me, and we were just staring at each other across the river. Its head looked up. I saw its eyes, and it was not a bear, because bears have snouts. They don't have flat faces. It didn't stick around long. I'm thinking probably about 2-3 seconds, and it was gone. Turned around, ran. It's about it. I don't know what else to give you.
Dylan, when you saw the creature for a few seconds, do you remember it had a particular shape to the head that you saw? Or
yeah, pretty long head, but a small face, if that makes any sense. Really big forehead, just friggin' huge.
Okay.
And yellow eyes and a real big eyebrow.
By big eyebrow, do you mean the actual hair of the eyebrow or the ridge?
I mean, it's all covered in hair, but you could see that area was like a bump across the whole forehead, one big bump.
Would you say most of the face was covered with hair or only certain parts?
The face part, it almost looked like an Amish guy. You know how they'll shave the mustache, but have a big beard from the sideburns all the way around? Looked like that.
Did you notice anything particular about the nose of the creature at all?
Pretty flat, and people have round nostrils. This thing had more like a slit looking thing.
Did it show its teeth at all? Any emotion that you got from its face in the few seconds that you saw it?
I think it was surprised, looked at me pretty wide eyed. One of those stunned looks for a second, like a deer in the headlights.
It sounds like you were able to see it move a little bit, moving on 2 legs or on 4.
It moved on 2. It stood up and just turned away and walked.
You were able to see the hands at all, or what's the lower part covered by bushes or something like that?
No, he was in the river. So saw the hands. They's wet, but they were there.
Did you notice anything out of the ordinary about the hands?
Oh, they had thumbs for sure. They weren't more feet.
Gotcha. And the hair covered all the way down to the hands?
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the face of the creature, let's say if you had to put it in a category, human category, and you have ape category, or I guess maybe you have something completely different, could you put it in any of those categories?
I mean, it looked more ape for sure. It has big cheeks, round, like what is that thing? The orange ones from Asia, orangutan.
Oh, really? It reminded you of an orangutan look?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because of the cheeks. Okay, yeah, I'm picturing that in my head. I know exactly what you're talking about. Length of the hair. Did you notice anything in regards to how long the hair was?
It's pretty shaggy, so it had to have been fairly thick. What that would be, maybe 3-4 inches thick, like a shag rug looking deal.
Did you notice a color to the hair at all?
Yeah, like a dark brown, black looking, very dark color.
Were you able to see the feet or lower legs at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you notice anything about the feet or the legs at all?
Not anything other than they had two feet.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely no shoes. The hair went pretty much clear down there, but I couldn't tell you in detail what the feet looked like.
What was the weather like at this time?
Raining.
Temperature?
Oh, probably about 60, 65 degrees.
Okay. Did you notice any particular smell at this time?
Yeah, it was frankly one of the worst smells I've ever smelled in my life. Wet, mangy. You ever been to a animal shelter?
Sure.
And smelled that weird, rancid, sweaty dog smell? Yeah. And you could smell it across the river.
Okay. Remind me how far away roughly you were again.
I would say between 40 and 30 feet. The river there, probably about that wide.
And that smell just hit you from that far away.
Yeah.
Wow. That is wild. When you saw the creature moving, getting out of the river, then probably walking a bit, did you notice anything about how it walked, its gait?
Yeah, it stood up and turned on its heel in one motion. And it took a huge step onto the riverbank and then another step. And then it stepped into the salmon berries, but really big steps. He probably covered 10, 20 feet in a matter of nothing. He was gone in almost instant. Quiet.
In quiet?
Super quiet.
Quiet. Okay. Picturing the way that it's moving in your mind, do you feel like that's a way of moving that a human could replicate, or was it different than the way that a human would move?
I don't think a person, even a tall guy with really good coordination, because tall people usually ain't that coordinated. I don't think you could really get out of the river soaking wet. And the ground here is moss and rock. So when you're stepping on it, you think it's soft, but it'll tear your feet up really quick. It's slick too. And it was really rainy that day. I don't think that a person could make that kind of movement with bare feet. They have to be wearing cork boots.
Were you able to get a feel of how long the actual foot of the creature would be if you had to give an estimate?
The foot of it?
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to guess. Probably something in the range of 14, 15 inches, if I had to guess a number.
Sure.
Pretty big.
Around this time, what were the sounds around you like? What other sounds were you hearing?
You hear the river.
Mm-hmm.
You would hear some crows. There were some eagles and little breeze going through the trees. Mainly the rain. Is really heavy rain.
Gotcha. So not entirely 100% quiet, but you were still hearing a few birds. Okay. Gotcha. Do you remember what your emotional reaction was in the few seconds you saw this happen?
First, I was in a daze, and I stood there probably 2-3 minutes after it left. I couldn't move. Almost felt like an out-of-body experience, like I was paralyzed.
Did you tell anyone right afterwards what had happened, or did it take a while for you to share what you'd experienced?
No, I didn't tell anybody for 6-7 months. I've only told about 3-4 people.
Is there a reason why you took so long to share that?
I was trying to figure out what the hell it could be, for sure. I don't like jumping on things and just coming up with theories. I have a really good friend of mine, and he'll see aliens everywhere. There's aliens in the supermarket and lizard people and all that other stuff. But I was thinking I've been in the forest my whole life. I was logging since I was 14. So I've seen bears. I've been logging in Alaska for 6 years now. There's wolves, there's bears, there's deer, and in Southeast Alaska, that's about it. Large animals, I've seen there's mangy bears. They get sick sometimes and they'll lose hair. They look really weird. And sometimes they'll stand on 2 feet. This thing is not a mangy bear. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I was questioning my sanity for a while.
Wow. Some other questions about what you'd seen. Do you remember anything about the arms of the creature at all?
Apart from them being hairy and all that.
Was there anything weird about the length?
They were long, for sure, longer than proportionately you'd see on a bear.
Mm-hmm.
The hands definitely went lower to about the knees, I'd say, a little bit, about the kneecaps, or the fingers would be resting if it's standing straight up.
Did it look like you're looking at a creature that had normal amount of digits, like we would have, like 5 fingers and 5 toes, or I don't know if that's something you were able to notice at all, or.
I wouldn't be able to tell for sure because he's soaking wet and some of those hairs are bunched up, might have looked like fingers, but I couldn't think more than 5 and less than 4.
Gotcha. Was there anything that were you able to tell if you were looking at like a male or a female of the species or anything like that?
It did have a big chest. Without getting too graphic, it didn't look like a guy. It looked like mammaries there.
Okay. Gotcha. That sounds like it's the first major interaction you've had, because I was thinking back to the first story and it sounded like at that point you only saw a creature that was in the water. Did that creature ever get out of the water that you saw, or how did you feel?
No, it was swimming.
One?
It was swimming, and it was an animal. It wasn't a log for sure. It was making noise in the water. You could see trying to breathe and stuff.
How much of the animal were you able to see in the water? Was it shoulders up or just the head, or?
The water was pretty clear. We could see the head up in the water, and when it would swim, you could see parts of the upper shoulders, but you couldn't see anything definite below the waterline there. Kind of a blob.
Okay. What were the main features, since you weren't able to see a lot of the creature like you were the one that we just talked about? Were there any major features that you saw that you were like, okay, yeah, this is a Sasquatch or a Kushtaka or Kushtaka?
Oh, Kushtaka, yeah.
Yeah.
Still the flat face, but the heads they're so oblong that they look like they could be a snout, but they aren't pointed in the direction that the animal moves, if that makes any sense. It's the peak of the head points back and the animal is moving forward. It wasn't on a bear, I think, seeing bears swim and any other animal I've seen swim. The snout is always pointed in the same direction. Bears and them, they don't do backstroke.
Have you ever seen any other creature that has a head shape similar to that?
No.
Okay. You said the one creature looked more like it had a orangutan face to it. Was that also similar to the one that you saw swimming, or was that a completely different setup?
We weren't close enough to be able to make that out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Asking some basic questions. Either of these encounters, were you able to get any pictures or audio recording or see any tracks, any evidence like that?
I did not take pictures, and I honestly don't look to take any pictures of anything. I'm not a good photographer. So I did come back not long after, and I looked in the river there for any tracks, but it's hard to find tracks here. It's all moss, and if anything's there, an impression, the best luck you have is around a riverbank. And when it's raining, you won't find much.
Going back to the orangutan one, do you have any idea of what the creature might have been doing there at that spot when sounds like you stumbled upon it? Was it trying to do any certain activity, or?
I would assume it was fishing because It was a salmon run, and it was leaning over the water. It had the front arms there in the water, and it was looking in the river, watching. It wasn't looking anywhere else before I showed up. So probably fishing.
Did you ever do any research to see if you could find any or talk to anyone who had seen similar things in that area where you were at?
Yeah. My friend from Kenai, I've talked to him, and the locals around here, they'll tell you that it's Kushtaka, and their stories and descriptions of them are pretty similar, what they look like, what they're up to, where you find them. They almost always seem to be around water. That's the one commonality in all those encounters I've ever heard of up here.
Did you grow up on the island then?
No, I came up here to work.
Okay.
Ended up staying.
when you first got to the area, did you notice the presence of Sasquatch in the culture right away?
Oh, yeah. Before I came up here, I was logging in Oregon and Washington, and it's pretty similar as far as a prevalence in the folklore and culture of the region. I would say it's very intense and closely tied.
Guys that you were working with, did they have similar experiences themselves, or?
If they did, they don't tell anybody, and it's pretty hard for me even to talk about it. You don't talk about this kind of stuff. It's a pretty no nonsense industry.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm very, very thankful that you are able to talk about this. I know it's a thing where you are still in your career, and I can tell that at times this is hard to talk about for you. If you had the choice whether to see it again, would you want to see it again, or?
I'd absolutely like to see it again.
Why is that?
I'd love to, because it's a special thing. It's something that I don't think there's a whole lot of them left. It's like walking in an old growth forest. Only a handful of people will ever be able to do that, unless as the world is closed up and we destroy more of it. Actually, probably going to go out again and look for it at the Carta.
That would be awesome. You'd definitely let me know if anything comes to that. Is this a thing where the memories were coming into your dreams, things like that?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I don't think so. I had a dream about it, but it's not like a thing that had happened all of a sudden, like a magical shamanistic deal. More like a PTSD dream, quite honestly.
Do you have any advice for people that maybe they've had an encounter like this, of ways that they can move past it and just be able to deal with everyday life?
Yeah. Eventually you got to tell somebody, and I wouldn't be too concerned if they believe you or not, because who gives a rat whether or not anyone believes you? You can only believe your own two eyes and your nose and your ears.
Why do you think it's important to actually be able to share to someone else?
Partially because you drag them into it with you. And all of a sudden there's another person they might not believe you. They might, but now there's more people who have to at least think about it.
Gotcha. Dylan, it's a very interesting encounter. Thank you so much for sharing what you saw with me and my listeners. I hope you are able to go back to that area. If you are able to notice anything weird up there, definitely keep us in the loop. I thank you so much for taking some time chatting with us tonight. Do you have any closing words about your experiences? Or
I suppose the last thing to say would be, I really hope that nobody comes out here to hurt them. That's about it. Because we get a lot of trophy hunters, and I would imagine they'd love to get their hands on something like that.
I would hope it never comes to that. That's totally different than getting a specimen for science, I think, the whole trophy hunting thing. But yeah, I hope that it definitely does not come to that. But Dylan, thank you so much for your time tonight.
No problem. May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you get a lot of reports from around here?
So I've only had the opportunity to talk to one gentleman who was a chaplain with the Salvation Army about his time up there at Prince of Wales Island. From what I've heard, there are many people. It's just being able to get the connection to them, which is why I resorted to pretty much posting in random Prince of Wales Island Facebook groups. And then someone, I think, sent a message to you or tagged you in it. But I know there are lots of people in your area that are seeing things. It's just being able to get in touch with the right people. Yeah, definitely.
Was he from Klawock?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, huh.
Yeah. It was a Klawock thing. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. If listeners are listening and there's other individuals that have had sightings in the Prince of Wales Island area, I would love to talk to you as well. You can always send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. But yeah, I've had the privilege of talking to one other person so far, but hopefully more in the future.
All right.
All right. Dylan, thank you so much for chatting. Feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can ever help out with, and hope to be in touch with you in the future.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your night, Dylan. Is this not working tonight? Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Bill, I'm going to call you back right now. I apologize. Let's see. This is going to take a minute. I have to call him the old fashioned way real quick. Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, who's this?
Hey, this is Jeremiah.
Oh, hey, man.
Hey, calling you back.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't have it set up right on my side, so it's my fault. But thank you so much for calling. What's going on, Bill? I didn't get a chance to listen to your voicemail. Yeah, what you got going on?
I just basically rambled about it's a terrifying event to see these things. It's not a Harry and the Hendersons feeling. There's no warm fuzziness to it. I'm calling from Kenai, Alaska right now.
Oh, from Kenai, Alaska?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm about 2 miles away from Port Chatham, where the Sasquatch ran everybody out of that.
You're 2 miles away from Port Chatham?
20 miles.
20 miles. All right. What have you experienced up there?
Well, it started before I even knew what Harryman or Sasquatch or Bigfoot was. I was 6 years old, and one was looking in my bedroom window on the second floor of our house, which was 18 feet off the ground, and its whole face and head filled the window. And I freaked. I pounded on my brothers and sisters' door, and they were like, go see mom and dad. So I ran to my mom and dad, and that's when it started. But my wife and I have seen them recently many times over the years. That's part of the reason we moved from Fairbanks to Kenai.
Did you move to get away from them or to get closer to them?
We moved to get away from those specific ones.
Okay.
They had pretty much proven that they weren't afraid of anything I had to offer in defense of my property. They did what they wanted. They walked through there when they wanted. They did what they wanted. I have 4 dogs, and between the 4 of them, they're almost 700 pounds of dogs. And the dogs would just be terrified, absolutely worthless for any kind of protection at that moment when they're hiding behind you. They don't do that for bear or moose or anything else. They'll gladly go after those. They would chase my dogs back to the house.
What kind of dogs?
I've got an English Mastiff that's 248 pounds, a Great Dane that's 200 pounds, a St. Bernard that's 160 pounds, and a half Husky mix that's 100 pounds. He's the lap dog. They all think they're lap dogs, but they're not. But they're huge. And to see him go after a grizzly fearlessly and then cower from stuff that we couldn't see, it was terrifying. It was like, the only thing I could tell my wife was we had no running water at our house. We were building it. So we would go to my mother's house to bathe. And then at night we would walk home, and we had this 100-foot long trail that snaked up through the woods. And there was one about 10 feet from us in the dark. You could see its hand because we had left the kitchen light on in our house, and my mom had her porch light on. So we had placebo amounts of light, but you could see its hand, and it was well bigger than my chest. It could have grabbed me by the chest and picked me up. I'm 5'6". It could have grabbed me by the chest like a toy if it wanted to. It was huge, and it growled at us, and you could feel it in your bones. Everything, just you could feel it ripple through your body. And I told my wife, because my wife stopped and looked at me just panicked. And she could tell I was just as panicked, because it was like, yeah, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do but stall. You know, I told her, I said, don't run, keep walking, get in the house. That's your only goal. So she turned and she started walking towards the house and walked about 50 more feet up the trail, and then boom, into the house and slammed the door behind her. So I finally started walking, and it was all I could do to stand there for 15 seconds to give my wife time to get into the house. And then I started walking, and it let out this grumble, and then you could hear it take off in the dark. And as soon as I heard it running away from me, I ran away from it. I know it wasn't running away from me. It wasn't afraid of me. It was just done scaring me. But they seem to get off on scaring people. So we put up with it for 15 years and left. We couldn't deal with it no more.
So you had encounters like that for 15 years. What was the thing that broke the camel's back? Because if you put up with 15 years, it would have had to been something wild that happened that made you like, okay, this is it.
Well, the slapping on the house where it would shake the whole house and knock pictures off the walls, and the growling and the constant terrorizing, they seemed to like to scare the dogs a lot. To just keep the dogs in the house. No, we're out here. We're going to hang out here. We're going to do what we want. You're stuck in there. And because you couldn't drag them out. You physically could not drag them outside. They would not go. Sure. And more often than not, they would block the door with their bodies. 2 or 3 dogs sometimes hold the door shut just so I couldn't go outside to have a cigarette. I took that as my sign from God right there. It was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to open that door. I don't need a cigarette that bad.
Yeah, no cigarettes today. Did you ever get a good, clear look at the face of the creature?
Yes, I've seen several of them much closer than I've ever want to be to one again. I can tell you that. Their skin varies, but they all look human. In the face, human enough to recognize there's part human in there. Some kind of human. It's not all demon or whatever the hell they are.
Are you able to describe the features that are in your memory from what you've seen over the years?
Like they really like to mess with us. His skin was so black, it was almost blacker than black. It's hard to describe because he had his eyes would change colors. You'd see sometimes his eyes were white with a blue iris, and then white with a red iris, and brown. It was the same thing, but its eyes always changed. And sometimes at night, you could see red eyes, like emanating light out of the woods around the house. And it was like, yeah, no, we're not going outside tonight. We're done. We lived in the woods compared to what a lot of people think the woods are.
How far away was your nearest neighbor?
By then they'd opened up a subdivision, and I'd warned all my neighbors that lived in the immediate area where I had seen them, look around you when you're outside. Don't just assume you're safe. Look around you when you're walking around, especially at night. And one of our neighbors had an incident where one roared outside of his house, and his house was 150 yards from mine. And I'm sitting on my front porch at 3:00 in the morning having a cigarette. We were having a pool tournament, and I had to smoke outside. So I sat on the porch. I had a bench, and I heard this crack like a entire tree just broke. And then I heard that again and again. And then this roar came, and you could feel it hit you. like a wave in the ocean just splashed up against you.
Have you ever heard any baby cries in the woods?
Yes.
Really?
Right in Fairbanks, Alaska. I built my house 75 feet from my mom's house so that I could take care of her, because I had taken care of her all my life. She was suffering, hurting. And so we built our house 75 feet away so that we could get to her quicker. So there was no drive time, no wait, no lag. It was like, bam, we're there. And we had all just got done eating Thanksgiving dinner. There was probably 15 or 20 of us, my cousins, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, whatnot. And everybody walked outside to stretch their legs. And it was a warm night for Fairbanks. It was like 25 above then. And we heard this baby crying. And several of my aunts and uncles were like, whoa, we're going to get that baby. It was like, wow, no, you're not. Nobody's leaving the yard. There's no reason. Nobody left a baby in those woods. I promise you. We'll go look from upstairs with flashlights before we go walking out there. And then everybody got terrified and just started bum rushing the house all at once. And, you're getting 2 people at a time through the door. So everybody just wadded up on the outside of the front porch. And me and my uncle stopped because we both had cigarettes lit, so we couldn't go inside. So we stopped right outside the door. And it continued for a while. And then it changed to owl noises and bird noises that you wouldn't hear in the dark. And it got terrifying all of a sudden. I heard of other people.
What was it that made it become terrifying for you all of a sudden?
There's like a pressure that they seem to push off that, I don't know, it's scary because they're there.
Yeah.
And they want you to know they're there. So they I don't know what it is, but they make this pressure that you can feel, and you just automatically are terrified. It might be innocent. Sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
But because I know for them to be able to rattle their bones when they growled at my wife and I, which on more than one occasion, there's got to be some level of infrasound there because nothing else does that.
Was that a one-night occurrence where you had the baby cries and then you heard the birds that shouldn't be there, or did that happen multiple times?
That happened multiple times over the years in that area. It was, off and on. I'm 55 now. I didn't realize what was going on till I was in my 20s because I had no grasp of what could be out there, what is out there.
What was it that kind of turned the lights on where you realized that, hey, this is what I've been dealing with is something way outside what I can control?
My father and I were moose hunting one time, and we had 4x a long ways into this mountain valley. He didn't want to risk going farther and getting stuck and having to walk that much farther out. We augured around and turned the truck around to make a good flat takeoff area when we were going to leave. And we walked even farther into that valley on foot. And I seen the shoulder of one as it was going behind this huge spruce tree. And I told my dad, I said, there goes a moose right there. And my dad was already like straight up, like something got his attention. And I turned and looked at him, and he lowered his gun down. He didn't aim, but he was pointing the gun in that general direction. And he said, that wasn't a moose, let's go. And then I realized what I thought was the butt of a moose was the shoulder. It was probably about 9 foot off the ground, rolling behind this big spruce tree. And to see my dad scared was an event because you didn't ever see him afraid. He fought in World War II, the Korean War. Yeah, he was not that kind of guy. He was a John Wayne kind of guy. He didn't get scared. And so that really made me nervous. So we backed our way out for a long ways, probably a quarter of a mile before we turned and just booked it. And we got back to the truck and I asked him, I said, what did you see? And he goes, you seen the same thing I seen. And I said, all I seen was its back. He goes, I seen it looking at us. And I was like, oh, brilliant. But needless to say, we never moose hunted in that valley again.
Are you able to share was there a name for that valley or?
I don't even know.
Okay.
We would just take off in his truck and go for miles and miles. And when you want to get big moose, you got to go deep into the woods, deep miles. This was before cell phones or anything, so I had no GPS or anything. It was just nothing but rolling hills up there in Fairbanks. And if you drive 40 or 50 miles out of town and start driving into the mountains and rolling hills, everything looks the same.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. Something I hear a lot from different interviews when it comes to Alaska is that the Sasquatch can be extremely aggressive up there. Is that something that you've run into from things that you've heard?
The ones that my wife and I have encountered seem to be more aggressive than not. They weren't afraid to let you know they were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they weren't afraid of you at all. We were barbecuing one night outside of my mom's garage. I'm remembering thing for Ma, because we were leaving. We were done. We couldn't be there no more. Mom had passed away years before, and it was time to go. And so we were doing one last barbecue and party at the garage, and one ran by the front of the garage while my wife was sitting out there and scared her so bad. She ran into the garage and closed the door and said, we're going home now. And she was ghost white.
Wow.
And all I caught of it was a gray and white and black-haired leg running by. But it shook the concrete foundation of our garage.
That's wild. Did you happen to get any pictures or recordings of any kind?
I've got boatloads of pictures and stuff, but the strangest thing is everything around these hairy men or Sasquatch is crisp and clear in the picture, but they're always blurry.
Right. That is usually the case, isn't it? Yeah.
I used to have a photo lab, and I think that they can mess with an electrical field. So if you're using film, you can get a crisp, clear picture. But I think they can do something to cameras. I don't know. But they didn't like the infrared light produced by the cameras. They would skirt around that light. They would show up in the middle of the day sometimes. And it just amazes me how some people refuse to see what's really going on around us.
Oh, sure. Definitely. Would you, even though they're blurry, do you have any available to maybe email to?
I could email them to you, but it'd take me a little while because I would have to take them off my computer, put them on my phone, and then send them to you. I don't have internet where I live.
Oh, okay. If you are able to, I'd think it'd be really cool to see them. I appreciate it, but only if you have the time to do it. So I
am forcefully retired.
Okay, so you got some time.
I'm disabled. I spend all my time in my front porch. Sorry, my dogs are going off.
Yeah, that's all right.
You can hear them.
So remind me, are you currently having interactions right now with the Bigfoot?
The last one I had, thankfully, was 3 months ago.
Okay.
And he was 50 feet from me. I'm assuming it was a juvenile. It looked young in the face. It was only about 6 foot tall. but it was built bigger than any linebacker I've ever seen. And it was pulling these branches down, looking at me on my porch with the same confused look I gave it. And as soon as we made eye contact, he turned and disappeared into the brush.
If you had to categorize them as something, sometimes people will say, look more like an ape or it looked more like a human. Would you be able to do either of those, or would you have to use a certain?
The one I've ever seen looks more human than not. They have a very human-esque quality to them, if that's even a word. I got to do something.
The dog's having a good time, though. That's all right.
He's on the other side of the house, which shocks me.
Wow.
Something is going on inside of that. Samson, enough. Hey, Samson, get down. Hush now. Hard to tell a 7.5-foot dog when he's standing on his hind legs to hush now.
Yeah, hopefully there wasn't a Bigfoot out there, right?
We've heard some weird noises. I believe in God and I pray when they're done. You can actually rebuke them in the name of the Lord and they will run away from you.
Really?
Yeah, even if they're being terrifying, just like feet away from you.
Interesting.
I don't know what they are, but I know they got to be more human than people think. They're not apes by any means. I'm sure there are different varieties of them, given the descriptions from all around the world, but it's a terrifying event every time. It's never fuzzy and happy.
I can't imagine going through the stuff that you've gone through before you moved. That just is really, that is wild. I don't know what I'd feel bad for your wife, definitely. Yeah.
My wife is tougher than nails. She's 5'2" and just tough as nails, because I don't think I've met another woman in my life that would stay around something or stay in a marriage and a household that long with something that terrifying going on all the time.
Good for her.
All the time.
Yeah.
Over the years, that's a long time. I give her a lot of credit. I call her my big burly wife, but she's 5'2" and 120 pounds.
She'll stand up to any Bigfoot for sure. That's great. Oh, Bill, I appreciate you calling in. This has been a fun chat. Please keep me up to date if you experience anything else. You can send me an email.
I will. Just called in on a whim. It was like, yeah, time to say something about it.
I appreciate you sharing your Alaska Bigfoot encounters with us. It's been a good time. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you.
We'll talk later.
All right.
Good night. All right. That was Bill from Alaska. Fun to talk to you, Bill. Thank you so much. Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, Thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed. Share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list.
These are all in Oregon, by the way. Oak Ridge, Dexter, Fall Creek, Deschutes National Forest area, Cultus Lake, Spirit Lake, Subtle Lake, McKenzie River area, Sweet Home area, the area west of Crater Lake, east of 230 West Diamond Lake Highway, and north of 62 Crater Lake Highway.
You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.